The work that we do, both in arts education, which is very, very important to all of us who are working in the arts, so that work that we do is to gather people together. And there are people probably who are not at all tuned to one another, and that they have different perceptions and all kinds of things. But to gather them together and to create a piece of art that everybody would understand and find meaning in. And that, to me, is a victory for people who are working in the arts, because people's awareness broadens and understand, and they understand others better.
Well, I think when it comes to making the complete person or making you whole, I think for me, it was far advantageous for me to be exposed to that kind of environment as opposed to what a lot of black kids were growing up in, a lot of poverty. It gave me a vision that you can achieve. Although I was a pretty nutty rascal back in those days, and I was kind of the class clown in elementary school at Lowell Elementary on Spring Street, Spring and Jameson. But I think anytime you have an advantage, or you have the advantage when you've been exposed to different elements in society, and whether they be negative or positive, you can grow from any of those experiences. And I was able to have that advantage that other black kids didn't have. And I came from a mom who grew up in a prejudiced South, who actually had the misfortune of seeing a uncle hung and by the Ku Klux Klan. And when she came to Lima as a teenager, I'll never forget her telling me that one of the first experiences that she had here was extremely negative, and she saw some of the same things here that she saw in South Carolina. And her first thought was to get back on the bus and go back to South Carolina. She told me about experiences in which she had to, or when they chose to be involved in sit-ins in downtown Lima, because they were not, waiting on African Americans. But despite her life's experiences, she never allowed us to carry around some of the burdens that she had. She always taught us to be fair with people, and with the hope that people would be fair with us. And most of my experiences in life, that's been the way it is. People have been, pretty fair. I can't tell you I've been in circumstances where I didn't think there was racism, because it's out there. It really is, and it's unfortunate. But the negatives that you encounter in life, you just can't allow them to hold you down.
Yes, I think it definitely starts in the home. I can tell you, and whether it is obviously said to you or not, it definitely starts in the home. And then you carry that with you as you yourself grow into adulthood, attend school, and then form your own friendships and participate in activities.
Very good.
That's one of the areas of any school environment that goes beyond any boundary. When you walk in that room, the clique, the popularity group, you have a mix from all different types of race, gender, and you're all there on an even basis, because it's total acceptance. It's not segmented or categorized. And I think so the acceptance is there, and maybe because of that same groove that you fall in, it seems to be the area that more things can be approached and tolerated and understood. So there's a freer type atmosphere. It may be because you aren't in straight rows giving the same answer that you're supposed to, or predicted answer, that things are open and discussed, and there are multiple answers for a solution, or it's multiple solutions for a problem. So because of that, more criteria comes into it, and therefore it's better accepted or understood.
I wanted to bring out the idea of what is a graphic artist to them, and how to communicate in the real world. If they had a job and they wanted to print a job at a commercial printer, how would they tell the printer what they were looking for? And often that's frustrating for someone. They know what they've got in their head, but they just don't know how to communicate it. And I thought the kids really lit up when they started to do that, because some kids like drawing and some kids don't. But I was surprised that some of the kids that weren't great drawing kids, or great kids with the motor skills in the class, had very good conceptual ideas, and this gave them an opportunity that they may have been shunted before, where they just couldn't get it out on paper. Here they were able to get their design and brought forth.
Just like the word almost says, is the prejudging of someone, before you get to maybe meet or interact with that person, prejudging them based on what they look like. And again, that can be expanded, to not only just skin color, religion. It could be size, weight, height. How someone speaks, how someone dresses, anything. So, but prejudice is to me, just that prejudging of someone based on, again, what you see maybe at face value.
I think that is pretty much when we have our preconceived notions of what someone is going to be about, again, based on how we perceive them. Even in the subtle ways, it can creep in if we're not careful. I think it comes from how we were raised. I think it comes from where we grew up. I think those all play a part in it.
My definition for racism is someone that doesn't like a person more than just the color of their skin. It's because the way they act, the way they talk, it's everything as a whole. To me, it's not more just because of religion, race, it's just everything, stereotypes and such like that.
The speaker who talked about going to the country club and what they weren't allowed in until one of the friends asked them if they would say prayer. Oh, yeah. And they ended up saying a Jewish prayer. And ever since then, they were allowed back in. And it's just weird that they would let them out just because they're Jewish.
My definition of prejudice is, it's sort of the same, but it's like disliking somebody just because, your family, you know what I'm saying, dislikes them, and then you picked it up, and then you just don't like them because you don't even know why. You just don't.
I think, the arts is definitely a great area for people to be engaged in and then be exposed to, that can actually cause more information to be spread to decrease the biases and prejudices that are out there. When I had brought the Indian dance team to Lima, part of the reason why I brought that is because, one, part of it was for me. I wanted it here. I wanted my kids to see something without having to travel to Chicago, New York, Detroit. And then part of it was also just to bring something different to Lima, because I thought, I grew up in a small town in West Virginia, and we had a plethora of interesting and cultural activities. So just because I move out of there, why do I have to limit myself in Lima, Ohio, to that exposure for my children? So I brought that here, and it was interesting, the biases and prejudices that people had, because they, some of the comments were, well, I'm not going to go watch a bunch of turban-wearing terrorists, to, come to the, come to the dance. And so it really opened my eyes in terms of the knowledge base that our community has, and I wouldn't say, I hate using the word racism. I just, that wasn't a word that I think I told you this before, We weren't allowed to use that in our home. So it wasn't racist to me, it wasn't. It was just a pure lack of knowledge and a lack of interest to actually be exposed to anything different, whether it was the Indian dancers or the Chinese acrobats or, anything of that nature.
I wasn't really exposed to it at an early age. I think the situation more than likely that occurs is the family environment, and I think there are a lot of families who, from generation to generation, that's been passed down, and rather than open their minds and their hearts, they're more willing to rely on that family tree, that family history of prejudicial treatments toward others. Obviously, it's a learned process. I mean, there's no question about that. You put two babies in a circle together, and they're not going to even notice the differences. It's a learned process through all those factors that you encounter in life, and those kids who develop it at an early age have been taught that at an early age. And again, I think if you would trace back their history, it's because their fathers and mothers and had to undergo the same process. And it's just been a lifelong process. Things are a lot better today than what they used to be. These circumstances that you see where a minority can pretty much get into any college in this country that you want to, providing you have the grades, or if you possess athletic prowess, there's going to be somebody that's going to be looking for you to enter their college, and that was not always the case in this country. There was, the situations with people who tried to integrate the colleges in the South. Medgar Evers stands out in my mind. That just was not always the case. It was very difficult for minorities to enter into colleges, and when you tie into the fact that someone's economic status is related to their educational status, you can see why there's a history of poverty in the African American community. And I think that is unfortunately a trend that I see going back to because of the behaviors that I've seen in kids.
Over the years, I've seen a lot of kids who I think had some elements of racism ingrained into them when they were younger. And in the high school, it would come bubbling up. And it goes both ways. I've seen black kids who felt, very strongly about white kids in a negative way, and vice versa, of course. It cuts both ways, and it can come in both directions. How I would respond to it, whenever possible, I would put the kids together and sit with them and talk and try to get to an understanding, at least, that there needed to be a level of respect so that we could just get along, because we can't have the constant war going on if we're going to be about the business of education.
I think that any type of art, whether music or a video or just a painting, is a great way to get a message through, and it's another way of saying it so more people will understand the message that it's trying to send out. And it has more of a stronger signal, so it actually comes into play more.
My definition of racism is a kind of hatred towards a certain either gender or race, religion, disabilities, wherever somebody would come from.